Greetings and salutations, everyone. Here we are with another delightful video. This time I'm going to go over the making of original Dungeons & Dragons, 1970 to 1977. This is a historical book published by Wizards of the Coast for the 50th anniversary. This contains a good chunk of history of the run-up to the original Dungeons & Dragons, as well as the first few years of it being on the market, or the years it was basically the primary system of Dungeons and Dragons. First and foremost, you see that there's a plastic wrapping on this. I've already cut this before because I've actually paged through it. There are some important notes about this. I'm going to remove the plastic because actually the plastic holds on a whole bunch of extra stuff. Remove the plastic. As you can see that there is this extra sheet on the back containing a whole bunch of information. This sheet is loose, however, runny nose. On the other side of this sheet happens to be a character sheet for the original Dungeons and Dragons. This was the basic format in which TSR used for original Dungeons and Dragons and BX Dungeons and Dragons as a character sheet. It's very simple overall. You have all your essential information on this side right here, your experience totaling right here, your gold and treasure, equipment, spells, and magic items. So it's essentially a single sheet character sheet. As you can see that this book is rather chonky. The binding is fairly good on it, which is nice. You have a total of four bookmarks, ribbon bookmarks in this book. There is a dust jacket on the outside that you can easily remove. That simply just has the inner ampersand, the title on the back, as well as castle, as well as a castle on the backside. The dust jacket is nothing special on the inside. It would have been nice if it was a matte. The outside is all red with black accents and gold. It has a hex grid on the back and the front behind the ampersand. We open it up. It has a black inside with various images from various editions of Dungeons and various artwork from various supplements of Dungeons and Dragons. Original one. You got the whiteout sheet, a white sheet with the same ampersand as well as the title of the book. Going from there, you have the credits for the book as well as the table of contents. The table of contents actually continues on to... Well, that's basically it. I forgot. It's a single page table of contents that basically goes over the major parts. The preface, the foreword. Part 1 is precursors, the stuff that happened before Dungeons and Dragons. Part 2, the 1973 draft of Dungeons and Dragons. Part 3, original Dungeons and Dragons. And Part 4, articles and editions. And then the afterword, a whole new game. This book is really heavy, so I'm going to tilt this down. As we go in, here's the preface. By the way, there is not a whole lot of text in this book overall. You have the preface, and then you have the foreword, which is basically the one big section right here. And then we have the precursors. This goes over the game systems that led up to Dungeons and Dragons that Gary Gygax developed and Dave Arneson and other people tied to them, as well as various typed out notations on various things. Most of the book is going to be like this, where it's literally just photocopy of a previous booklet that was produced for TTRPG, either the Dungeons and Dragons or the precursors or supplements. So generally there's very little writing from the author of the book, and it's just basically him describing what you're going to see in the next few pages. And then you basically get a bunch of images of various old books or booklets of various TTRPGs. So it basically goes over this and that. Panzerfaust, those medieval miniatures, supplement, and so forth. You have Chainmail, which I also own a copy of. I actually own the 3rd edition printing of Chainmail. And then there's the fantasy supplement from the Chainmail. Does not contain all of Chainmail in here. Or at least doesn't contain all, it doesn't contain all of Chainmail. So you just basically have the fantasy part of Chainmail in here. And then you go a few more pages. By the way, there's a color theme. The first chapter is red. And then you go over the pages. This is all the other little miniature games that tied into the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. And then you get to chapter 2, which is, if you remember, is the draft of Dungeons and Dragons. And you have this blue bottom border. And then you get to... So this whole chapter is basically letters between Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, as well as rough drafts for the original Dungeons and Dragons. And then we continue on forward into chapter 3. Which is the earliest version officially released that Wizards of the Coast had access to. Which contains a little section explaining it, the brown box, as well as the original artwork and various characters and items. This is exact photocopies of the original Dungeons and Dragons. As you can see, it's just them taking a photo of a page, putting it on a page. And it just goes through that. And then it also has a whole bunch of other, all the core stuff for that. And then we have part 4, which is the articles and editions section, which has this military green section. It basically goes through Greyhawk, Blackmoor, Eldritch Wizardry, etc. All the different creatures and artwork in there. And then it gets into, I believe this is the articles right here. So you got, get into that. And then there's excerpts from the Strategic Review, which is the earliest magazine or fanzine, I call it a fanzine, but it was the earliest newsletter magazine that Gary Gygax produced for TSR, which contained a whole bunch of information on various new creatures to add to your game system, as well as different weapons and rules for customization, as well as the bard information. Then you have Blackmoor in here, the earliest version of Blackmoor that Wizards of the Coast gained access to, including with all the sexy artwork. And then it continues through. And then you have additional excerpts from the Strategic Review. And then you also have, continuing on from there, and one of the earliest depictions of Demogorgon. As well as little bits of information from various other articles for various legendary weapons in Dungeons and Dragons. Various tables. And so forth. And then we have the dragon, which is one of the first advertisement for the dragon, I do believe. which is the magazine that replaces the Strategic Review, premiere issue cover. And then it has the basic information on bullets and the information that was included in Dragon. And that's basically it. Because once they get into Dragon, that is right around the era in which basic Dungeons and Dragons and basic and expert or BX Dungeons and Dragons started up. And then shortly after that, we got advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, what do I say of this book? This book is pretty much just photographs of old material created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, repackaged to sell to the masses with just a little bit of minor writing by the author of this book. The author really spends most of his time in the most of the words he writes is in the forward and basically describing what you're going to see next, with not a whole lot much more beyond that. To be quite frank, I could have wrote this myself. Probably could have wrote it in an afternoon, and then looked at all of them and like, oh, here, and then Wizards of the Coast might have actually got more writing out of me than in this Jon Peterson. But anyways, it's pretty much almost all entirely photos of old material with minimal explanation from Jon Peterson. So, this book is like $100 book, but honestly, if you see it and it's $100, and you truly, truly love learning about history and seeing the oldest version of Dungeons and Dragons and some of the stuff around it, this is in your worth it category if you love throwing money into the wind. However, overall, a lot of this information is on the internet, dirt free. You can find it on the internet free. It's not going to cost you $100 to learn it. And really, I honestly, I do not recommend it unless you're a person who truly, truly is obsessed with learning every facet of a really old version of Dungeons and Dragons. Original Dungeons and Dragons fundamentally operates extremely differently than modern Dungeons & Dragons, D&D 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition, that you don't really see a whole lot of mechanics you can borrow from it for the newer editions. You can borrow stuff from it for newer editions, but it requires a little mental creativity and adaptation. If you see this for sale, like for $40 or $30, I would say, sure, go ahead and pick it up. But typically this is like an $80 to $100+ range, unless you're a super obsessed person who wants to buy it and give Wizards of the Coast a bunch of money for just simply taking photographs of stuff that already exists and putting it into a really heavy book. Yeah, then you go ahead and buy it. Personally, I only bought this because I'm really fascinated with the history of all things, and I like to inform and show off things to people. I might at some point in the future create a video a series of videos that goes through each and every section of the book, and it's a page through video where I basically just open up the book and then read out and give my thoughts on each page for each part or chapter and go from there. However, I am not super flush with time. I do have a lot of time on my hands with a whole lot of other projects, namely a lot of this and my day job and my secondary occupation and all my D&D, all my tabletop role-playing game and D&D game sessions. So there you go. Overall, I do not really recommend buying this. It's literally just giving Wizards of the Coast tons of money for just basically taking photos of various stuff that other people have compiled together and then reselling those photos. So there you go. I'm not going to give this a score, as this is a $100-ish monstrosity of a book, and this is basically just a historical record item for all those dorks that all the dorks and geeks that really want to just learn about the oldest version of Dungeons and Dragons and the games that are related to it really early on in its existence. So there you go. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month. And if you enjoy this video and my other videos, please subscribe and hit the like button. Go over to the channel page and go to the community section and go check that out. There's usually some polls in there of the future videos that are coming out in the future, as well as videos that have occurred in the past. It's a really easy way of scrolling through that list and finding out really quickly what I have here. Or you could just go to the video section if you want to just find out what I have on the channel and see that. So I usually cover an extremely broad range of TTRPGs, showing off products that are not just simply Dungeons and Dragons, but also stuff from Chaosium, Cubicle 7, from the OSR, from Paizo, and much, much, much more. Sometimes I'll even do periphery products like calendars and things like this. So there you go. If you enjoy this, as I said before, please check out my channel page and see what else is there that will interest you. See ya. Thank you for coming by.